What's up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm filming at night, which I don't normally do, so the lighting's a little bit off. I'm sure it bothers absolutely nobody but me. But anyways, today I'm going to be speaking about kind of a topic that I've not spoken about before. I always say that, but it's something I've definitely not covered a lot. It's a suspicious death. So something that's not necessarily labeled as an accident and not labeled as a homicide. It's just kind of floating, and that will be the suspicious death of Adrienne Salinas. Now, it all started when she vanished from her own apartment in Tempe, Arizona on June 15th, 2013. While a lot of the details about the night have kind of come forward over time, there are some things that authorities have found out. The most crucial time period in which she actually disappeared, there's a lot of questions surrounding it, so that's why everything is kind of up in the air right now. And the answers that they really need are in her phone, and they do not have it. So now let's just kind of speak about Adrienne herself before we dive deeper into this video. Adrienne was a beautiful and sweet young woman. Every single person that spoke about her and knew her said that she was one of the happiest people that they knew. And I'm sure you can see from pictures already of her, she was known for her beautiful smile. She was always so happy. There was rarely a time where her smile was just not beaming. She definitely was a little bit more reserved. She liked to keep a tight friend group, but she was still very popular because she was always willing to help. She was always very kind to everyone, no matter the situation. Police interviewed over 100 people separately, and out of all of these people, the worst thing that anybody had to say about Adrienne was that she lost her phone a lot. That's it. That's the worst anyone could come up with. She was just a sweet, sweet young woman. She had recently just graduated from Arcadia High School, which I believe is in Phoenix. It looks like it could potentially be in Scottsdale, but the address is Phoenix. It's kind of like right in the middle. And she moved right below that, so a little bit south, to Tempe, Arizona after graduating to live with her friends Shani and Rebecca. And this is kind of an exciting time for her. Obviously, not a lot of individuals that are 19 years old are able to move away from home right away after high school. So she was living it up. She was having a good time. She did have a job that was allowing her to live this life, but she had just recently stopped working for a bit. She still had a job, but she ended up getting something known as valley fever, which I did not know existed, but apparently you get this from living in the desert in Arizona, and it messed up her lungs really badly to the point where she had to have surgery on them. So while she was getting better, she was still recovering and was not able to work at the time of her disappearance. But she was still well enough to really live it up with her friends. She loved her lifestyle, and one thing that they would often do would be throw parties. They loved to throw parties at their apartment and have lots of people over, and that is exactly what Adrienne and her roommates did the night of June 14th into the early morning hours of June 15th, 2013. So that night, they were throwing a party, and about 40 different individuals showed up to the apartment, and there was drinking involved. They were underage, at least I'm sure majority of them, but there was drinking involved, and everyone seemed to be having a really great time like they always did, except for Adrienne. Adrienne had been seeing a young man. His name was Francisco, but everyone calls him Fran, and they had a very complicated history. I'm not exactly sure how long their history together was. From what everyone describes it as, it seems like was something that was going on all through high school pretty much, and they were always together, but they never had a label, and it appears as if that's because Fran didn't really want the label of boyfriend and girlfriend, but they really encompassed what a relationship would be like. They constantly were with each other. They did not do one thing without the other, hung out constantly, stayed the night with each other. They, were intimate with each other, but again, there was just kind of this barrier up between both of them. And it was a tricky situation again because Fran seemed to be the one who wanted to keep it like this, but Adrienne wanted to be his girlfriend. She wanted to be known as his girlfriend. Her friends said that whenever they would go out anywhere, she stayed true to him. She would get hit on all the time because she was a beautiful and fun and sweet young woman, but she would always turn these men down because she really, really cared about Fran. But that night, I guess there had been some issues lately. Fran said that they had drifted apart, and he was at the party flirting with a lot of other young women. And this obviously made Adrian very, very upset. So it started a bit of an argument. Her and Fran kind of got into it for a minute, and they eventually decided to go back to his apartment where he lived in Scottsdale, Arizona, which was not very far from there. I think like a 15-minute drive tops, probably. And they were going to figure it out from there. Now, I'm unsure of the exact time that they left, but I'm going to assume, given the timeline that I have seen, it was sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning. But I do know that when they did get to his apartment, things did not go well. I'm assuming the argument escalated because around 3 a.m., shortly after they arrived, Adrienne decided to leave. She headed off on foot to head back to her apartment. That's how upset she was. Now, Fran was obviously upset too and worried about her safety, so he followed after her in his car and had to basically convince her to let him give her a ride home so she could get back home safely. But again, when they were in the car, things escalated again because not far from home, she ended up deciding to get out of the car completely, according to Fran, with no warning. Just in the middle of a conversation, she just jumped out of the car and started to walk home on foot. And from what it seems, Fran at this point just realized maybe she just needs some time alone. This argument's clearly not getting anywhere. So he decided to let her go, and he instead called her roommates and let them know what happened, that she was walking home, that she wasn't far, she should be there soon, and to keep an eye out for her and make sure she was okay. Adrienne did eventually make it back to the party, and her roommate said that she was upset, but she wasn't enraged or acting out or anything like that. They did speak to her for a little while before deciding to go back to the party to kind of give her some space. And shortly after this, Adrienne took off again. This time, I believe her friend said that she packed a bag and she ran out to her car. And a few people from the party did see this and knew that she had been drinking the entire night, and they tried to stop her. They did not want her drinking and driving, but she seemed to have her mindset that she was getting out of there, and they described it as her peeling out, leaving the apartment. But this ended up being the last time that her friends saw her. 2 days later, on Father's Day, and I'm not sure if her friends ever tried to get in contact with her. Maybe they assumed she was with Fran and that's where she went, or maybe they assumed she went to her parents' house. I'm not exactly sure. I can't say what everyone thought, but it wasn't until, again, 2 days later on Father's Day when her father realized something was very wrong. Adrienne was very close to her family, and there would never be a holiday, a birthday, especially Father's Day, where she would not contact her loved ones and let them know she cared about them or try to see them. From what it seems, I believe her family lived in Phoenix, so again, that's probably like 20 minutes away, and she did not contact her father, Ricky, at all that day. And when they tried to get in contact with her, Ricky, her dad, and other family members, they noticed that when they called her, her phone immediately would go to voicemail, and all of the texts that they had sent her, she never responded to. And this was completely unlike Adrienne, so he reported her as missing. Now, authorities had no idea what to think of the situation. Obviously, at this point, they're just hearing a father say that his daughter, that is 19 years old, that lives in another city with her roommates, is missing. They were trying to figure out what was going on, and the first place they wanted to go, obviously, is her apartment. They wanted to speak to Shani and Rebecca, and they both informed authorities about what happened that night, about the party, about the last time that they saw Adrienne when she left in her car. And authorities actually were able to match the time she left in her car with a 911 phone call that was made by a Starbucks employee around that same time, not very far away. So apparently this employee called in to report a reckless driver driving on First Street. The employee said that the vehicle flew past them, swerving, driving erratically, and then the car eventually hit a curb, blew out 2 of its tires, kept going for a little bit, and disappeared. While authorities were trying to figure out what this meant and where she might have gone from there, Ricky and Fran decided to go out and search for Adrienne. They started in her neighborhood, and just a few blocks away, they found her car. The 2 tires were in fact blown out, and at this point they weren't sure what this meant. There was also a notebook in the car, I believe a bag that she may have had clothes in, but I've seen that kind of wishy-washy on different sources. And there was also a BlackBerry cell phone. Now they obviously called this into authorities, and authorities wanted to come and process the vehicle, but by the time they did, and apparently they forgot to pick it up or something, I don't know exactly what happened around these circumstances, but I've seen that they forgot to pick the car up, and by the time they did, the notebook that was in the car and the BlackBerry were gone. Now, authorities reached out to the family who had been in the car and asked them if they took it. I believe someone in her family did in fact take her notebook, but no one was claiming to have taken the BlackBerry. And I don't even know if this particular BlackBerry was her phone. That's never been made clear, and whenever authorities are asked about this particular phone, they shut it down immediately. So authorities did take the car in to process it, and apparently they found nothing in there that helped them at all. There was no evidence of foul play. Obviously, it supported the fact that she did hit the curb. It did, in fact, match everything up 100% with the 911 phone call. So she clearly was intoxicated at this point because she was driving so erratically and crashed. The next place that they really zoned in on was her apartment, because they could tell from the way the car was that she was maybe attempting to go home, but no one claimed to have seen her after she left in the car the first time. So they went to search the apartment. At least that's kind of what it seemed like. And her roommates came forward saying that they were pretty sure she came home after she left in her car and blew out 2 of her tires, because they apparently found the clothes that she had been wearing that night as well as her wallet in the apartment. And authorities were able to confirm this. So from what their understanding was, she definitely did make it back to her apartment, or at least her clothes that she'd been wearing and her wallet did. But the strange thing about it is that nobody saw her come back. No one saw her come back, heard her come back, spoke to her. Nobody saw her leave again. So at this point, they know that at least her belongings got back home, but no one saw her come back. No one from the party. No one saw her leave again. Her roommates didn't see her come back or leave again. So her stuff got there, but they had no idea after that what happened. It was kind of like this black hole, and that is when she disappeared. So authorities decided to get her cell phone records, which didn't tell them everything, but it told them a lot. Now, we know that at around 3 a.m., she left Fran's to head back to her apartment. She got home at some point, and then at some point again, she left, ended up crashing her car, and according to the items found in the home, she came back home. Now, she apparently tried to call Fran 32 times between 4:10 a.m. and 4:50 a.m. 32 times. And then at 4:43, so towards the end of these phone calls, she texted him and she said that she was coming back over. But it didn't appear as if he tried to get in contact with her at all during this time. And when they asked him about it, he said that he was sleeping and didn't get all of this till the next morning. 10 minutes after letting Fran know she was coming back, so that would be at about 4:53 in the morning, Adrian called a cab to arrange a ride, assumingly to Fran's home. Obviously, she can't take her car because she has 2 tires blown out. He's not answering his calls, so it makes sense. But then at 5:07 in the morning on the 15th of June, her phone either died or was turned off, and that is it. It's not come back on since. So they were starting to kind of puzzle piece a few things together, but they still did not have a lot of answers. So authorities and all of Adrian's family and friends all kind of banded together and started to search for her. Authorities and all of these people combed through her neighborhood. They spoke with local residents to see if anyone saw or heard anything that morning. They distributed posters all around town, but the leads were very, very slim. All 40 partygoers were identified. Every single one of them was interviewed, and from what I've seen, they all gave the same exact story. Some of them saw her leave the first time, I guess more than a couple of them, enough to confirm to police that she did in fact leave in her car intoxicated, but not a single person claimed to have seen her in or out of the house the second time that she came back, which is odd because it was 40 people, and I'm sure it wasn't the biggest house ever. But still, they all had the exact same story. They also decided to take a look and really question Fran because he was in fact someone that she was arguing with that night, and when you're arguing with someone and they go missing, that's never really a good look. But he also didn't appear to authorities to be involved. They even spoke with his roommates to confirm the alibi that he was at home, and they both said that he was in fact at home during this time frame. And they also said that they woke up the next day and he was still asleep, and that when he found out that Adrian was missing, he was hysterical. That's the way they described him. It wasn't as if it was something he knew or had any idea about at all. He was beside himself and immediately jumped to action to help her dad try to locate her. So at this point, authorities had no reason to believe that anyone from her close friends did anything to her or was involved in this, nor was Fran. So they decided to obviously next check out the cab company. Now this is where things get bizarre. The cab company was named Scottsdale's Cab Guy, and it was owned by a man named Tom Sr. He worked for the cab company, obviously he owned it, and his son Tom Jr. also worked for this cab company as an employee. Now, when authorities reached out to them, they got them both on a conference call, and I'm pretty sure this was just 2 days after she was last seen or 2 days after she was reported missing. I can't say 100%, but this was a conference call, obviously, and Tom Sr. was still in the area, but Tom Jr. was actually with passengers at the time of this call. He was driving them to the Grand Canyon. And while on this phone call, they both claimed that night that Tom Jr. received a phone call from Adrienne asking for a ride. She seemed upset, according to Tom Jr. She wanted a ride quickly. He explained to her that he was 25 minutes away from the location that she was at, but he would try to get there as fast as possible because she was very clearly upset. They set a pickup location of an AM/PM, which is kind of like a gas station convenience store. It was only about a quarter mile away from her apartment. But when Tom Jr. arrived there, Adrian was nowhere to be found. And because of the state she was in her phone call, he expected her to be, ready for her ride, like right there, ready to jump in. But he couldn't find her. Surveillance footage from the AM/PM does confirm that Adrian was never seen at the gas station. It does show Tom Jr. pulling into the gas station and kind of looking for her. He tried to call her to ask her where she was, but received no answer. He even stopped to smoke a cigarette real quick and wait to see if she would show up, but she never did, so he eventually left. Now, authorities kind of felt off about this phone call, but when the passengers that were in the car with Tom Jr. got in touch with authorities later on, they knew for a fact something was not right here. So it was a couple that had been in Tom Jr.'s car when this phone call happened, and the woman was the one that called into authorities. She said that even before this phone call happened, she thought that Tom Jr. was a very, very odd guy, and then when she overheard this conversation, she felt that much more uneasy. They stopped quite a few times during this. I know Tom Jr. smoked cigarettes, so they would frequently stop for him, and then they would obviously stop for other things. But every time they would, the woman said that she would, go to her husband and say that she felt like they were in danger, that something was really off with this guy. But one stop in specific really horrified them. Tom Jr. wanted to smoke cigarettes. They pulled over to stop, and he went around to the trunk, popped it open, and pulled out a hacksaw and said, "Oh wow, how did this get here?" His behavior was far from normal during this car ride, and he just continued to talk about Adrienne's disappearance to this couple, which they thought was very strange. That was kind of a personal situation they assumed he would deal with really quickly and then move on from, but he kept on bringing it up. He kept on talking about it. He even said, "I was the last person to speak with Adrienne, but I don't ever remember making any plans to pick her up. I don't know if I was supposed to get her or if my dad was supposed to get her." So he's kind of saying all these things, but authorities already have footage showing that he was in fact the one to show up. Now, because of this, because of the woman that called in, they felt like Tom Jr. might possibly be involved somehow. And this was enough for authorities to decide to start surveillance on Tom Jr. on June 20th. But they only managed to have him under surveillance for a total of 3 hours because he started doing something they referred to as heat runs. So basically, Tom Jr. immediately tried to start figuring out if someone was following him. I don't know if they made it super obvious or if he was just paranoid already, but he started taking random sharp turns that led him to dead ends or forced him to do a U-turn, turn after turn after turn, like he was trying to get someone off of his tail. And eventually he did manage to shake authorities off his tail in a parking lot. But this was suspicious, so authorities decided to show up on June 25th to ask him to take a polygraph test. Tom Jr. completely denied this, said that all he was trying to do was give a girl a ride. He got there and she didn't show up and he wasn't involved and he didn't understand why authorities just kept harassing him. So he said that if they wanted anything else from him, they would have to get a warrant, which is exactly what they did. 2 days later, authorities showed up with warrants to search his car, his apartment, and they also took him in to get his DNA. From what I've seen, nothing really was found. But authorities are also keeping a lot of things really tight to the vest just because there is such a lack of any physical evidence or any evidence at all to even determine if this is a homicide or an accidental death. So they're trying to protect everything they can. I understand why they're not saying this. But to make the situation even more strange in regards to Tom Jr. and Sr., a couple weeks after Tom Jr.'s home and cab and everything were searched and his DNA was taken, authorities got another phone call from someone with very large concerns about Tom Jr. So a woman called in and she said that she was calling in for her cousin who witnessed something disturbing. On the night that Adrian disappeared, early morning hours, I guess you could say, her cousin heard screams coming from Tom Jr.'s apartment. It sounded like muffled screams, like a woman's mouth was being covered or had been duct taped or something, and the woman appeared to be screaming for help. This, again, sent authorities out to Tom Jr.'s apartment, but when they arrived, he refused to let them search, and then unfortunately, authorities were never able to get back in contact with the woman that called in or the person that supposedly witnessed this, so it kind of all fizzled out. So authorities were back to square one until a few months later on August 6, 2013. Something unexpected happened. There had been a very, very bad storm in the area that caused major floodings. I believe in some areas the waters were about 6 feet high, and it took a while, but when the waters receded, there were remains that were found. The remains were found about 30 miles away from where Adrian was last seen in the Apache Junction near the Superstition Mountains. The remains were sent to a medical examiner, and right off the bat, the medical examiner noticed scars on the bones that were consistent with the surgery that Adrian had just had not long before. But just to be sure, they obviously did a DNA test, and it came back positive. The remains did belong to Adrian. But unfortunately, the remains gave them absolutely no answers as to what exactly happened. It gave no answers to the cause of death, the location of death, the time of death. With the flooding, obviously the remains, were in water, possibly for an extended period of time. They could have been moved from one location to another. So they had nothing, and still they had no idea if this was a homicide or an accident. But they did know that there was no way really that she herself could have managed to make it 30 miles away without a phone that was working or on, after not showing up for a cab ride, not having a car that goes well. Someone else had to be involved in her getting that far away. Everyone was devastated because I don't think anyone really expected this to be the outcome. And then even when they did find her remains, the puzzle of what actually happened was not coming together. And that's absolutely no closure for anyone. It just makes you more upset and angry and frustrated. Authorities did the best they absolutely could and decided to take a look again at everything they'd already looked into. They looked at the partygoers again, and they looked at the roommates, and they looked at Fran, and it all came to the same conclusion that they likely were not involved. Roommates stated that she was crazy about safety. And for her to have gone off by herself that night, early morning, was so not like her. They always went everywhere together. They, joked about someone taking them if they were by themselves. They were aware that they were young women and they needed to defend themselves and protect each other. So they said the fact that she even left was just shocking, and it shows that she was just very, very desperate to get back to Fran, which also opens up a bunch of other possibilities. Someone could have pulled over and she, saw it as an opportunity for help, and they saw it as an opportunity for something else. There was no telling. Authorities have not stopped working on this case, and her family is still desperately searching and pushing to find out what happened to her. I know for a fact, because I've seen it, her name is in my suggestions form over and over and over and over again. But in this time period, there have been some theories that have come up. We've already kind of dug into a few of them, but there is one that you guys will be familiar with that makes me sick to my stomach. So obviously the largest theory is that somehow Tom Jr. or Tom Sr., one of them, are potentially involved. They did have very strange behavior, but surveillance did in fact show that Tom Jr. did show up. It appears he's alone. It doesn't appear that she was ever there. She never showed up in any of the videos, but that doesn't prove that he didn't somehow stumble upon her on his way out. What if she was just running behind? What if she was waiting to get out of the house without being seen? What if she stopped by her car first, took a detour, and then she saw him, noticed that this was the cab she had called driving away? Maybe she waved him down a few blocks down the road, and that's why there's no proof of it. We just don't know. It's also strange because authorities were shown a video that Tom Sr. posted on YouTube. So they were trying to shake authorities out of their business for a very long time. They were very upset they were being brought in the middle of this case because they felt they had nothing to do with it. For people that did not want anything to do with this case, it was strange that Tom Sr. would go and take the exact same walk that Adrian supposedly took, filmed it all, and then posted it to YouTube, all while saying his theories about what happened. It was very bizarre. I don't know if it's up anymore. I just saw clips of it on a documentary, which I unfortunately cannot put up here because that's copyright.
Well, it's Saturday morning, and we're at the corner just where Adrian lives, East Brown and South McKimmie. And we're going to take a walk similar to what she would have perhaps taken. See about time, but also give you an idea of what the area looks like and feels like. And her building is one of these two buildings that you see in the frame right now. And there you see 806, and you'll be seeing 812 in just a minute. But this is the area where the party took place. You can imagine that there's plenty of room for parking. The leasing office for the building, the pool. But if you look here, you see a pretty nice area. This could have been the area of grass that she sat out of. Could have been, I say. We don't know that. But as you see, she would walk down here, and that's Hardy down where the stop sign is. We're going to take a little bit of a walk. You're going to see a park. You're going to see some other things. I'm going to try to keep the pace going so that we can get an idea of the actual minutes that it may have taken her to walk here. Completely empty. But more than that, at the corner of 5th and Hardy, not only is there a completely empty building, but you can see there is no fence here. And so you have right over here, and I'm not even going to go in there because I'm scared to death about it. And that's the park. And look at those electrical boxes here at the park. If she stayed on this side of the road, and there's a beer can, she would have had to walk by this box, and this box, all of which somebody could hide in.
It was odd. He starts at where she lives, and he kind of just walked the entire way and pointed out like every tree, every possible place someone could have been hiding, and jumped out and snatched her, which is beneficial, but it's just an interesting length to go to for someone who claims to not want anything to do with any of this case, anything about Adrian, anything about finding anything out. It was just strange. When authorities confronted him about it, he claimed that he was just trying to help, but it's still definitely a little bit odd. I do know that Tom Sr. himself has a pretty extensive criminal history, and I do know, I think in 2018 was the last time something big happened, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're involved in any way, shape, or form just because they have a criminal history, but just the whole situation, the behavior is just off. Now then, there's a lot of speculation that's kind of happened online and that authorities have briefly spoken about. It's really strange to some people that there's no witness or anything to 100% prove that Adrienne did in fact go back to her apartment, or if she did get back, that she ever left. As I said, many people witnessed her leave the first time. People even went to the extent of trying to stop her, but the next time that she left, assuming there are still 40-some people there, which there might not have been because it was like 4 in the morning, sometime between 3 and 4, no one saw her leave. Not a single person saw her leave, saw her come back in, nothing. And that just is kind of strange. And then some people have questions about how on earth Fran slept through 32 phone calls. I mean, he might have had time at this point to get home and go to sleep, and yeah, he did miss them. But at this point, authorities have stated that there's nothing at all that indicates to them that any of these people were involved, and they've looked into them multiple times. I do know that Shani and Rebecca will not respond to anyone's attempts to contact them about this. Could that be because... But that could just be because it's traumatizing for them. This is someone that was really close to them. Even with saying that, authorities have said that they will not ever fully rule anyone out until this is actually solved. So no one is ruled out entirely. Now, this is the one theory that kind of blows my mind and terrifies me, because I have spoken about this man. I've covered his murders. I've covered his potential third murder. I have gone so deep into this, and I will try to have you guys a video or my video linked down below. And those of you that know will immediately know and be terrified. And it's possible that Brian Patrick Miller, aka the Canal Killer, could have been involved. Now, I spoke about him when I covered Brandy Myers. I met Brandy Myers' sister at the first crime con that I attended. Wow, that was 2 years ago. But I met Brandy Myers' sister, and she spoke to me about Brandy and the fact that she believed that Brian Patrick Miller, the Canal Killer, was responsible. A lot of you guys are going to know about this. If you've been here for a while, we tried to get in contact with the police department and get them to do something about it. He does have 2 known victims. He is currently incarcerated, but essentially, if you haven't watched the video, he seemed like an everyday average guy. He had pictures with law enforcement. He was known as the zombie hunter because he did a lot of kind of cartoon things, cosplay. He decked out an old police car with like his zombie hunter stickers and would go around dressed up. But underneath that all, he had some serious issues. He tried to murder a woman, I think 2 women. I can't remember all my facts perfectly, so don't come at me because I remember a lot of information all the time. But he was not good. From an early age, it was said that he had very violent sexual tendencies, and it would just escalate. He was known for luring these young women in and I won't get into details, but it just wasn't good. And one of his victims was found decapitated. And that's one thing that a lot of people think connects to Adrienne's case, because her skull was never found. Now, on top of that, because that just could be circumstantial information that he lived close by and, it's possible. A year prior to Adrienne's disappearance and death, Brian had actually been in the area where Adrienne's body was found. He was with a friend, a really close friend of his, and they were doing a scavenger hunt, and they went to pretty much essentially right where Adrienne's body was found. So he knew about this location where her body was, and Brian's friend, the same one that he went on the scavenger hunt with, all of that, heard about Adrienne's disappearance and heard about her remains being found, heard about the circumstances, the location, the details, and to him, it was just way too coincidental how much this lined up with the things that Brian did to the two other young women. But he had another reason that really pushed him to call authorities, that really made him believe Brian was someone that they needed to look into. The weekend of Adrienne's disappearance, this friend and Brian, the Canal Killer, went to a party together not even a mile away from Adrienne's apartment. This is just a very upsetting situation, because I feel like when you look at most theories in a case, they're all kind of possible. And obviously they're theories because there is information within the circumstances that make them theories, that make them seem possible. But I feel like way too many of these options seem way too valid. Like, what are the chances that the cab driver you call, is the creepiest guy, according to passengers of his, is creating issues with the police, has a hacksaw in the back of his car, has people calling saying there's screaming coming from his apartment, a young woman screaming, and at the same time, a known killer is less than a mile away from you. It's just, I can't even imagine, and it makes me so upset because she was so vulnerable at this time, emotionally, mentally, physically. She was highly intoxicated from what it appears, very emotionally distraught. She was a young, small woman walking by herself on the side of the road in the dark. And there are just way too many people that were around at the time that could have taken advantage of that. And not just, the people I've spoken about. There could have been anyone with bad intentions driving down that road. If her goal was just to get to Fran, to get there no matter what, she would have maybe gotten in the car with anyone. She seemed desperate. She was willing to call a cab and walk a quarter mile to the gas station for it. She blew out her tires for it. I mean, it's just terrifying to think of all of the possibilities. Right now, as I've said, the case is not classified as an accident or a homicide. It's just a suspicious death case because authorities just do not have the information that they need to make it sway one way or the other. But they are, in fact, from what I've seen, exhausting all possible options. Police department is doing a fantastic job. It doesn't seem likely at this point that it was an accident. Mainly, obviously there's lots of factors that make it seem like it's not an accident, but to me, again, the one thing that really sticks out is the fact that she ended up 30 miles away, and we know she had no car, and we know she did not make it, as far as we know, at least to the gas station to get in her cab. So she could not have made it that far without someone taking her there, which makes me happy that authorities are understanding that. And despite not having the information to push it one way or another, they are exhausting all options, because a lot of the time, thought processes are kind of forced in one direction and so much can be missed, you guys. This could be a circumstance where authorities saw it as her being a runaway. Think about it. There's a girl, loves this guy, spends all the time ever with him. He won't date her. He won't say he's her boyfriend. And then it all blows out. And yeah, I can see this completely. And a lot of other police departments that I've spoken about here, I can see them saying, yeah, this is totally a runaway situation. She was upset. She was mad because her and her boyfriend got in a fight and she felt like he didn't love her, so she ran away. Imagine if they had thought this. Imagine all of the information that would have gone overlooked, all of the evidence and things they could have potentially lost. So I'm very, very happy that this was treated in a very neutral way to where it could go either way, but they wanted to make sure they were prepared no matter which way it went. Now, right now, the FBI is offering a $20,000 reward for anyone with information leading to the identification, arrest, and conviction of whoever could possibly be involved in Adrienne's suspicious death. This is heartbreaking, you guys. She was such a sweet, sweet individual, and not a single person had a bad thing to say about her. And she had one bad night, and something horrible might have happened to her. And authorities are really just waiting for the one right tip, for the one right thing to be found. Her cell phone, from what I'm understanding, unless authorities are just, again, not speaking on it, which they haven't been, her cell phone is still out there. And that's the one thing that could kind of pin down a little bit more what happened. The one thing that I find so odd is if that BlackBerry that was in her car was her cell phone and it disappeared, to me it seems like there might have been something else on there that someone did not want authorities to get to. But there are only a few people that would have had access to that or known where her car was. And that kind of brings it closer in instead of, oh, this could be a stranger abduction and murder. So just kind of food for thought there. Let me know what your opinions are down below. Please post this video, her picture, anything possible that you can anywhere, Facebook, Instagram. Share it as far as you can because one tip can mean a complete shift in this case. But that's all I have for you guys today. I want to thank you, as always, for taking the time out of your day to listen to Adrienne's story. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to become a part of the Hallan fam so we can hopefully bring them home together. And before I go, I want to remind you guys that I will be at CrimeCon this year and at the beginning of May. All of the information is linked down below. I have a discount code for you guys through the podcast Crime After Crime, which is the podcast that I co-host with John Lorden. And after mentioning that last week, a lot of you guys said you weren't aware of that. Yes, John Lorden and myself have a podcast together called Crime After Crime, and we can get you guys in to CrimeCon with a discount if you use the code CrimeAfter20. That should again be posted down below. At least I'm like 98% sure that's the discount code. But enough rambling. I hope I get to see some of you guys there. A lot of you have already said you're going to be there. A lot of you that I've seen comment every single video for years now. So I am so thrilled. It's always such a great time. A lot of fun stuff to learn while you're there. A lot of awesome sessions. And also I get to hang out with you guys and meet you guys. And that's like the best thing in the entire world for me. You have no idea. But I'm going to stop rambling. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.